Hello everybody! Welcome to Creating the Basic Adaptable Game Engine Library, Part 53, Asteroids Explosions. In the previous video, we finished implementing the lasers. Our spaceship can now shoot lasers, and when a laser hits a rock or an asteroid, they both disappear, which is great, but also anticlimactic. So in this video, we're going to add a sprite sheet animation of an explosion that's going to appear when a laser hits a rock. We'll also see that we need to add a little bit more to the basic adaptable game engine library to kind of simplify the removal of these animations when they're finished. So to begin, let's go ahead and head over to our development environment. So here we've got our Asteroids game, and the sprite sheet which we're going to be using, the explosion.png. You can see that it's actually got 6 rows and 6 columns. This is a 6x6 sprite sheet. And we'll want it to go through the different images pretty quickly as well, because explosions are fast. And let's see. It's also worth noting that this last frame is empty. However, the object will still be on the screen unless we explicitly remove it. So we'll keep that in mind as we begin. Alright, in the Asteroids game, since we're going to be spawning asteroids at a later time, we're going to create one animation and initialize it at the start of the game, and then we'll clone that animation as needed to create more sprites later on. So to begin, let's say create a public animation. Let's call that explosion anim. Right, and just like we use the laser text later on, we're going to use explosion anim later on as well. All right, so down towards the end of the initialize method, let's set up explosion anim. And this is going to be a new animation, right? And there's a lot of parameters that we need for this. So to begin, we need the file name. And so this is going to be images/explosion.png. And other parameters that we need the number of rows and columns. And so we know that this is 6x6. We also need to know how long each frame of this animation should be displayed. We make that pretty short, maybe 0.05 seconds. And then should this animation loop? Nope, explosions are a one-shot deal, so we'll make that false. All right, and those are all the parameters we need to define our animation. Okay, next step is whenever a laser hits a rock, we're going to create a new sprite to display the explosion, and we want to clone this animation. Right, remember, each animation loads a sprite sheet. We don't want to keep loading the sprite sheet again and again. Right, and we can't just reuse the same animation because each animation has its own parameter which keeps track of which frame of the animation it's on. It has its own elapsed time. Alright, so here we have rock overlaps laser, rock remove self, laser remove self. Let's now create a sprite called explosion. It's equal to a new sprite. Explosion.setAnimation. Let's set that to explosion anim.clone. Just put that on the next line so it's easier to see. All right, let's also put the explosion. Let's set the position to the position of the rock. All right, so rock.position.x, rock.position.y. All right. And then we want to add the explosion to the game. We don't really need to add it to a separate group because we're not going to really do anything with it later. So let's say group.add this new explosion. And And that should do it. And I think now we should see some explosions appear. Let's go ahead and give this a run. And we'll shoot those rocks and see what happens. Alright, something did not compile correctly here. Oh no, that was a compile message from previously. Still compiling, here we go. Let's go ahead and let's shoot these rocks. Yep, sure enough, there's our explosions. Still feels a little bit slow, so I might make that explosion time a little bit smaller. Right? But that's easy enough to fix. We'll decrease the frame duration. The one thing we do still need to deal with is the fact that there are still explosion sprites on the screen. We just can't see them because the last frame is blank. So what we'll do is we're going to add some actions to automatically remove itself. So what we really need is an action that says, is the animation finished? And we have no action like that, but it's easy enough to write. Before we write that, I actually want to add another function to the animation class. In particular, I'd like to add something called isAnimationFinished here. Right, we have a method called getCurrentTexture, an update method, a clone method. I also like a method which returns a boolean called is, let's just say isFinished. All right, so this method is going to check, well, basically, this condition right here in update. Right, update, remember, if we're looping something and the elapsed time is large enough that it gets through all the different frames of the animation, then the elapsed time is reset. Right, this line of code, we need something like it for the isFinished method. And so what I'll do is I'll write return, right, we know this is finished when the elapsed time is greater than the frame duration times the texture list size. Right, when all the frames have had long enough, when enough time has gone by that all the frames have had a chance to disappear. And so this is going to be a useful method. In fact, I could even use it to make this bit of code a little bit more readable. And if you're set to loop and the animation is finished, then reset the time. All right, so isFinished is going to be useful. We're going to incorporate this into an action. Right, and maybe we'll call this action isAnimationFinished. Right, kind of like remove self is going to call remove self. Public static action isAnimationFinished. And it's going to have the same format as every other action. And it's going to return a new action, which takes in a sprite called target, a double delta time, a double total time, and then, well, basically we're going to check to see if the animation's finished. Return target.isAnimationFinished. Oh, sorry, this is target.animation is finished. There we go. All right, and you might be wondering, how are we going to use it? This code doesn't do anything by itself. All right, so what we'll do, this is most useful if it's added to a sequence action. Right, we can have a sequence action which first says is animation finished, followed by remove self. Right, and since those would be added to a sequence, right, until is animation finished returns true, it will stay there in the sequence. Once is animation finished is true, right, then it will be removed from the sequence, and then the sprite will proceed to the next action, remove self. And this will help, well, remove sprites when their animations are done. Right, I need a semicolon down there. That looks great. Now let's head over to Asteroids. And so for the explosion, I would like to add an action, and this is a sequence. So action.sequence. And first we have an action is animation finished, followed by an action remove self. All right. And that will cause it to remove itself when it's done. Now, how are we going to test this if the last frame is empty? Well, for that reason, I have some other sprite sheet animations in here as well. So here's a different one. This is for like a warping effect or a whirlpoolish effect. Just another fun special effect. This is an 8x4 animation. Right, so I'm going to temporarily replace explosion with this other one just for testing purposes. All right, so the animation is created right here. I'm going to temporarily replace it with warp, which is, let's see, what is this, rows by column, so 4 rows, 8 columns. I'll have each one of these display for 0.2 seconds. Now let's give this a try. So instead of the explosions this time, we're going to see kind of like a purple ripple effect, but when it gets to its last frame, again, it should automatically disappear. We're trying to test the is animation finished action. Yep, and it does disappear. All right, we see it for a moment, then there it goes. Excellent. All right, this is looking pretty good. Okay, so now I can replace this with the explosion animation. Set this back to explosion, which is a 6x6. And I just do want to run this one more time. Right? We decreased the amount of time that each frame is displayed, so the animation will happen more quickly. And hopefully this will look even better. All right, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and shoot some rocks. Okay. And everything's blowing up. Fantastic, as expected. Very cool. So we now have explosions. The next thing we'd like to add, right now you might notice nothing happens to the spaceship when it's hit by a rock. And in the traditional Asteroids game it would immediately disappear. But in this game I'd like to build in kind of like a hit point counter of some sort. And so we'll do that with something I call shields, which is kind of like a surrounding force, or a force field which surrounds the ship and protects it from getting hit a number of times. But we'll talk about this in the next video. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.